Every single day I talk to a ton of people just like you who are moving to San Antonio, and every single day I get some of the same questions, so I figured why not do a video on some of the top ones that I get all the time. This is questions about some of the major topics like snakes, like property taxes, like flooding, I mean all those different kinds of things that you really want to know about. So this video we're going to talk all about those, so make sure you're sticking around to the end and seeing all 7 of these top questions that I get about moving to San Antonio. By the way, I just thought of another one, so I am going to add an 8th bonus one there to the end, so make sure you stick around to the very end for that. So the first question we get a lot, and it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 questions I get about just about from everybody, is how is the flooding here? How bad is the flooding? And realistically, you don't ever have to worry about it too much. They don't really build houses in the flood zone for obvious reasons, and especially new developments, you definitely don't ever have to worry about it. Probably the worst example that I can think of was back in 1998, and that's what they call the 500-year flood. So in 1998, in between San Antonio, Seguin, New Braunfels, La Vernia, all these areas, we got 15 inches of rain in 3 days, and in the first day, it was about 12 inches of rain in one single day. But like I said, that was a 500-year flood. Once in 500 years, that is gonna happen. So you really don't have to worry about, hopefully, that ever happening ever again. I mean, there's the biggest thing that you really got to worry about if you're, looking at houses that could potentially flood. Look in the FEMA flood zones, obviously. When you're buying the house, they have to disclose whether or not it's in the flood zone, so you really don't have to worry about being surprised about it. And then the other thing is just don't buy a house that's on a river or a creek or a stream or anywhere close to it. I mean, if that's the issue that you're worried about, just avoid that part at all costs, especially if you're up in like the hill country or, in some of those areas that are more dry, not really any creeks or rivers or anything around them. You don't have to worry about the flooding at all. Second most asked question I would say in this situation is, what are the areas with the cheapest property taxes? Texas and San Antonio are known for having high property taxes, so where are the lower ones? In San Antonio, you're right around like a 2.4% rate. It's actually not too bad compared to some areas in like Houston and Dallas that I've heard of that are over 3% in some cases. There are areas in San Antonio that are up as high as like 2.7, 2.8%, and most of that is due to the MUD tax. The MUD tax is the Municipal Utility District, which is basically they developed the neighborhood and they had to put all the infrastructure in place to provide the utilities, the sewage treatment, the natural gas, all of that stuff to that neighborhood, and so they charge a property tax that is never ending for those lovely neighbors of yours. But the cheaper property taxes are usually out in the suburbs. Boerne, hugely popular area, and one of the places I get the most calls about 1.6% in the lowest areas, and on average is like 1.8% in some of these suburbs. La Vernia, 1.8% in most places. There's a couple other places that are out there around 1.8, 1.9%, but overall, if you get out of the suburbs, out of the city of San Antonio, you're looking at more of like a 2% tax rate overall. So it's not quite as bad as you may think it actually is, even though that is pretty bad in double some of those other areas across the country. Now for question number 3, will there be snakes in my yard every single day? We came to the Buckhorn Saloon, and as you can see, we got some pretty ridiculous sized rattlesnakes here in Texas, but you're not gonna find these suckers in your backyard. I can promise you that. In my 30 years here, I have found 2 poisonous snakes ever in my yard, and that's with living in houses that are outside of the city, more in the country. I live on 4 acres now, backs up to a big ranch, so I have very high likelihood of seeing snakes if I ever would, but like I said, only 2 poisonous ones. Lots of little garter snakes, but they're very harmless. So you really don't have to worry about snakes at all, especially if you're in the city. If you're on, a property that has a little bit more rocky soil, more cactus, a little bit more space, you probably might see some a little bit more commonly. Copperheads and coral snakes are probably the most common ones, but again, as far as snakes go, especially rattlesnakes, in San Antonio, you don't really have to worry about it at all. Now when it comes to the other little critters, scorpions, spiders and all that, very common around here. Get pest control and it takes care of the whole problem. You get pest control regularly on your house, quarterly. I do that at mine. I hardly ever see any bugs in the house, and if I do, they're most likely dead. So just focus on that. If you move here, get pest control, and you really don't have to worry about anything. Number 4 is, how hot does it actually get in the summer? Well, this year, it was kind of a bad example. 2023 was the hottest year on record. There were 74 days over 100 degrees in San Antonio this year, and it was pretty miserable, not gonna lie. But there's a cavalry coming. I don't know if you can hear that or not. We're still in the Buckhorn Saloon, by the way. 50 degrees outside, windy, cold. I really can't stand any kind of cold temperatures under 60 degrees. So over 100 degrees, I much prefer that, especially even over 105, I'm okay with that. But realistically, it's not as hot as it makes out to be. It's 105 sounds hot, but it's not as bad as like Arizona or like Florida where you get all the humidity and everything over there. The heat index doesn't get near as bad as, those places that are extremely humid on the coast. It's much more bearable here. And so personally, especially if you're coming from a cold weather area, you're gonna like the heat here in San Antonio. All right, I've always kind of wanted one of these, especially from Buckhorn, so I'm gonna get this and wear it the rest of the time. All right, so now that I got my wardrobe changed, question number 5 that I get a lot is what are the best schools in San Antonio? So for me, the best resource to look at schools is txschools.gov. This is the state's resource for rating schools and it's completely like analytical. They look at the numbers. They don't just look at some subjective ratings from random people like greatschools.org. I'm not really a big fan of greatschools.org, but the biggest thing that I always get is like, okay, like I said, where are the best schools? Go look at the ratings. Those are the most important things to look at. But as whenever you are looking at ratings, some of the highest rated districts around here that most of the people are always asking about is like Bernie, Comal ISD, New Braunfels ISD, even Navarro ISD in Seguin, whenever people are looking at Seguin, Northeast ISD, specifically like the Johnson and Reagan High School schools that are kind of feeding in there in Stone Oak. And then you also got, of course, Alamo Heights. Like if you're looking for a high-end neighborhood that's really close to being like in the middle of town, that's another big one too. So, oh, and Medina Valley ISD is also really, really highly rated. So you got a lot of really highly rated public schools around here on top of all the private school options, but look at txschools.gov if you want to look at all those ratings, and that'll really give you the good picture as far as what the schools are rated in whichever area you're looking at. Now, question number 6 that I get all the time is what are the safest neighborhoods? This is probably the #1 question that I get, but what you have to know is that as a real estate professional, I'm legally not even allowed to answer this question. And I know that kind of surprises a lot of people, but it's just one of those things where it's very subjective depending on what your definition of safe is, right? So my biggest recommendation for this, look at a lot of those like crime maps, right? So go to Neighborhood Scout. That's my favorite one, honestly, because it shows kind of each of the different zip codes and areas. The lighter the color, you know, looking at the map right here, the lighter the color, the lower the crime, the darker the color, the higher the crime. You can kind of see it's kind of scattered around the outskirts of San Antonio where the lighter colors are, but also look at the San Antonio Police Department crime blotter. That'll show the most recent calls, what the calls were for, all of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to safety, that is the biggest thing, is you got to do a lot of your own research, unfortunately. I can definitely help you as much as I possibly can, and I always will, but just know that I'm not legally allowed to tell you, hey, this is the safest area in San Antonio, but I can point you in the direction of those crime maps, and those are a super good resource. And question number 7 is, how is the traffic in San Antonio? So everybody's always asking me, okay, I want to be within, 20, 30-minute commute of my job. I want to be within a 45-minute max commute of my job. I want to be an absolute max of 1 hour commute within my job. Well, the good news is that San Antonio, being one of the bigger cities in the country, actually, the 7th biggest city in the country, the traffic here is not as bad as you might think it is, and as bad as, a lot of the online trolls kind of make it sound to be. And like, you'll even find some people on the comments here that say it's absolutely ridiculous. Probably some people that are watching this video right now might even comment that. But the biggest thing that you have to, to know is that, like, for example, okay, I was up in Bulverde, north of San Antonio, about 10 minutes north of San Antonio yesterday. Left there at about 3:30 or so kind of right in the middle of like where primetime traffic is starting to get started. And it took me 40 minutes to get all the way across town, get into San Antonio, all the way across San Antonio and into downtown, or into the south side of San Antonio, and that is going directly through downtown San Antonio. The traffic here is nothing compared to some of those big cities, like especially like Austin, Houston, Dallas. I mean, I've been in all those cities with bad traffic, and it is just miserable. And it doesn't really matter what time of day it is either. You got your bad spots here in San Antonio whenever it comes to like construction and stuff, especially like up on 1604 where they're expanding all of that. Downtown does get congested, don't get me wrong, there are wrecks and things that happen, but most of the time any of the bad traffic is usually where there's construction or a wreck. The normal everyday rush hour traffic is not near as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Now for the grand finale, the bonus question that you've been waiting for, I've got a very small example of exactly what we're going to talk about right there. So again, that's not exactly a real foundation problem. That's just where it kind of cracked, right? But the number 8 bonus question that I have for you guys that I get quite a bit, that I don't get as much as I should, honestly, is what is the deal with the foundation problems in San Antonio? And the big deal is the black dirt. So especially like on the east side, more in town, even over kind of on the inner west side of San Antonio, basically like Terrell Hills, going all the way out to that area between like New Braunfels and Seguin and everything in between, Shirt Cibolo, all that. It is black dirt down there. So what that means is that black dirt, whenever we have droughts, it swells and shrinks, and it goes back and forth, and you get these big giant cracks that you can see. And it does that up underneath these concrete foundations. So everything in San Antonio, just about, especially the new stuff, is all concrete foundations. These concrete foundations, whenever you get those voids and everything up underneath there, they start to shift and fall and crack and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And you'll see these crazy drywall cracks in your house. You'll see in worse situations, you'll see the foundation start cracking really badly. But again, there's always shifting out here, but the bad stuff is whenever you get these major shifting. I mean, I've seen some foundations that are 8 to 10 inches off level. That's how bad they get. So it's just all about looking at each individual house, especially if you're looking at older houses, to make sure that you're not getting into an area or getting into a house that's got major problems. And if you do get into those areas, because Church Cibolo, that's a great area to be. New Braunfels to Seguin, that's a very popular area right now. Lots of new construction going out there. You just have to make sure that you're taking care of your foundation. They say to water your foundation, you can put the soaker hoses all the way around the outside of your house. Make sure you run those very regularly, especially whenever it's really hot and dry outside, to keep that foundation watered. Get gutters on your house so that you don't have all this erosion around the edges of your house and the edges of your slab. So all these different things that you can do to mitigate these potential problems. But again, if you are looking to buy a house in San Antonio and you are concerned about these foundation problems or the property taxes, for instance, and want to find a lower property tax area, reach out to us at the Life in San Antonio, Texas Home Group. Like I've said a million times on this channel, I've lived here my entire life. I absolutely love it here. I absolutely love helping people just like you move here, and so does our entire team. We'll do everything we can to get you in the right house in the right location that you really want for you and your family. So if you have any questions, like I said, reach out. My information is down below, and make sure that for this next video you watch, if you're considering a new build, check out the ultimate guide for buying a new construction house in San Antonio. And until the next video, we'll see you there.